I remember the exact moment when everything shifted. It was a cold winter's evening, the kind where the frost settles on the windowsills like delicate lace, and the air smells of both new beginnings and a biting chill. I stood there, my heels clicking against the marble floors of the extravagant ballroom, surrounded by people who all seemed so much more sophisticated and polished than I was. But I was there, in the middle of it all, because I had built my place one step, one deal at a time. He laughed at me. I don't mean just a chuckle or a light-hearted comment. No, it was a full, almost mocking laugh that echoed in the pristine space. It was at that moment, as I felt the weight of his eyes and the sharpness of his ridicule, that I realized how far I had fallen. The man I had loved for years, the one who promised me everything, was now the one pulling me down. I had always been the quiet one in our relationship, the one who sat back and supported. After all, I had married a man who seemed to have it all: a charming smile, connections that stretched across the corporate world, and a reputation that everyone seemed to adore. He was the kind of man who could walk into any room and immediately command attention. And for a while, that was enough for me. At first, I thought I was content with the life we had. But over time, I began to see the cracks. The small jabs disguised as jokes. The dismissive gestures when I tried to express my thoughts on business matters. He didn't mean it maliciously, or at least, I convinced myself that was the case. It wasn't until that fateful night that I realized what was really happening. We were at a gala, an annual event for his company. The lights were dimmed low, casting an ethereal glow over the crowd. There were familiar faces around us, important faces. I felt out of place in my modest dress, compared to the towering gowns of the other women. But I wasn't focused on my appearance. I was focused on making an impression, showing that I had the potential to do more than simply be by his side. I had been working on a deal for months. A groundbreaking partnership that could secure the future of the company. I had been the one to lay the groundwork, to talk to the right people, to negotiate with precision. Yet when I brought it up to him, his reaction was less than what I expected. You're really trying to play in the big leagues now, he said with a condescending smile, his hand lightly brushing against my arm as if he was humoring me. But remember, some of us were born into this world. Not everyone can make it. The words stung, though I tried to brush them off. I should have walked away right there, but I didn't. I stayed, just as I had always done, quietly trying to make myself worthy of his world. And then, in the middle of our conversation, a man approached. He was an investor, someone who had the power to change everything. He extended a handshake to both of us, and we exchanged pleasantries. What do you think about the upcoming merger? I asked him, trying to steer the conversation in a direction that would highlight my knowledge and capability. But before he could answer, my husband interrupted. You don't need to worry about that, darling, he said, a twinkle in his eye that spoke more of pride than affection. I've got it covered. The way he said it, as though I was incapable of understanding, made my blood boil. The laughter came next. It wasn't loud, but it was unmistakable. He laughed, and the people around us turned their attention to him. He made some offhand joke about how I was still figuring out the ropes of high finance, while he had already mastered them. I was left standing there, alone in front of the crowd. That moment was a turning point. I wish I could say that I stood up for myself right then and there. But I didn't. Instead, I held my breath, excused myself from the conversation, and retreated to the balcony. I needed air, I needed clarity. And more than anything, I needed to understand why I had allowed myself to be reduced to someone's afterthought. The cold wind bit at my skin as I stared out at the city skyline. I could see the glow of the penthouses in the distance, people living their lives in luxury. And I couldn't help but think about how I had once dreamed of being part of that world. And yet here I was, standing on the outside, a forgotten piece of someone else's game. That night, I made a decision. It wasn't a decision born of anger alone, though I was angry. It wasn't just about proving him wrong, though that was certainly part of it. No, it was about me, about realizing that I had the power to shape my own future. I wasn't just someone's wife. I wasn't just the quiet partner. I was capable of building something for myself. The next few months were the hardest of my life. I knew I had to prove myself. I couldn't rely on anyone else, not even my husband. If I wanted the life I had always dreamed of, I would have to fight for it. I took on more projects at work, spending long hours researching, learning, negotiating, and pushing for what I believed in. I started making connections on my own, talking to people who were willing to listen. I studied the industry, attended conferences, and built a reputation for myself not as my husband's wife, but as a businesswoman in my own right. And then, the breakthrough came. A deal that I had been working on for months finally came through. I was offered a stake in a major company, one that would give me the financial power I needed to shape my own destiny. It wasn't just a partnership. It was a chance to own something that had once seemed impossible. I didn't tell my husband right away. I didn't need his approval. I had already made up my mind. This was my moment. And when I signed the paperwork, I felt something inside me shift, a sense of empowerment I hadn't known I had. Months passed, and with each day, my confidence grew. I expanded my business, took on new investments, and built a network of powerful individuals who recognized my worth. The penthouse, the company, the life I had once dreamed of, it was all within reach. Then came the day when I walked into the office with the final details of my new venture. I could feel the eyes on me. My husband had just arrived from a meeting, and he looked surprised when he saw me holding a briefcase. I could tell he was about to say something, but I didn't give him the chance. "I need you to sign these papers," I said, placing them in front of him. "This company will be officially mine as of today. I'm taking over." The silence between us was palpable. He looked at me, then at the papers, and his eyes widened. "You're serious," he said. His voice barely a whisper. "Dead serious," I replied, my tone firm, and just like that, the world I had always wanted was in my hands. In the months that followed, everything changed. I moved into the penthouse, the one I had once envied from afar. I bought the luxury car I had dreamed of and surrounded myself with the people who believed in me. But more than that, I finally learned to trust myself. I had taken the risk, built something from nothing, and proven to myself that I was worthy of the life I had once believed was beyond me. And as for my husband, well, the dynamic between us shifted. He came to respect me, but it was too late. He couldn't see me as anything other than the woman who had once been by his side, the woman who had quietly followed his lead. But that was no longer who I was. I wasn't just his wife anymore. I was a force in my own right. A woman who had worked, struggled, and fought for her place in a world that had always seemed just out of reach. The penthouse, the company, and the luxury life I had earned it all. And for the first time, I knew that my future belonged to me, and no one else. And as I stood in the penthouse, overlooking the city, I realized that this was only the beginning. The life I had once dreamed of wasn't just something to look at from the outside anymore. It was mine.